Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild reference book, Eberronicon, a pocket guide to the world, designed by Laura Hirsbrunner with Will Brolley, Patrick Dunning, Joseph Meehan, and Jarrod Taylor, aka the Across Eberron development team for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping, supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, Chris, and Alberto, and gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, Nima, Marcos Dade, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, A.K. Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Ross, Limpy Spuds, and Jerome. Thank you all very much for your support. So I've previously covered some Eberron products. Most notably, I most recently reviewed the Eberron Rising from the Last War campaign book via my Roll20 review series. So I technically reviewed the Roll20 adaptation, but obviously I kind of reviewed the whole thing in general to the extent that you can review a mostly campaign book via a virtual tabletop format. Anyway, and then I also reviewed a Eberron DM's Guild adventure, I believe in 2018, called Sharn Missing Schema, I think it was. So I have a little bit of familiarity with the setting, but as someone that, which I think a lot of folks are like this, didn't fully get into Dungeons & Dragons until 5th edition. 5th edition has been incredibly popular, and I am definitely part of that crowd. I was kind of on the fringes of interest in D&D, mostly through some video games, back in the 90s. So Eberron, which was a 3rd edition creation, hasn't really gotten the same love as, for example, the Forgotten Realms. So 5th edition, as good as it has been, is almost entirely focused on the Forgotten Realms, which is not the only setting for D&D. In fact, I grew up with the Dragonlance novels. That was my big thing. I never read a single thing about the Forgotten Realms. For whatever reason, I had no interest, but Dragonlance, I ate that stuff up like crazy. All the books, everything. And that was my history with, and I didn't even know at the time that it was basically D&D, which it is. Eberron was created in, I believe, 2004 by Keith Baker, who actually submitted it during a design contest that Wizards was running. It's kind of a pretty famous story now in the early 2000s to create a whole new campaign setting as a high magic world that really dives into using a more modernized setting, but with magic. And it actually, from what I can tell, kind of works really well. It uses all of the D&D stuff, which was, I think the stipulation is it wanted to use all the material that was already in D&D. So you've got Rakshasas and Beholders and Half-Elves and Drow. All those things exist. So it's kind of a conversion. It doesn't have any new rules or anything like that. But it's just a different setting. It's a different world to play in. The factions behave differently. There's a whole different history there. And the technology level is a lot more different. So you've got like trains that run on lightning magic, which I was always confused about Eberron. I thought, for example, like most people, you see the images of trains and airships, and you're like, okay, this is like a steampunk magic setting then. And already within the first few pages of this pocket guide, it basically says, no, it's not a steampunk setting, specifically not. This is a world that doesn't need gunpowder or steam power because it has magic. Why would you use those things when you have freaking magic to work with? Now, granted, it does still say that actual high-level magic use is still pretty rare, and that's something that not everybody can do, and maybe, consolidated among the wealthy. The 1%ers of the world can do a lot of high-level magic, but low-level magic, which is enough to, have electricity via, light spells, for example, does exist in vast quantities. So that's just how the world is run. So you get a more modernized world, but that's built on magic. All of this stuff, you can read through those campaign books and you learn all of that and you dive in really deep. You jump straight into the deep end. What a pocket guide does is it's like wading into a shallow pool. So you don't get too deep into any one facet, any one area. You're not going to find out a whole bunch of lore about Drow or Gnolls or the Mournlands or the trying to think of it, like the Sovereign Host. I think is just the main 12 pantheon. You're not gonna dive into any one of those particular areas. That's what all these expanded books are for, or hopefully with Eberron Rising with the Last War, which should provide a one-stop campaign book for all your needs. The Pocket Guide pulls together the last 15 years worth of published lore and adventures and notes and source books and novels, all that information into a 50-page reference guide. And even saying 50-page makes it seem really long because you think of a pocket guide, but a pocket guide is named that way because it's tiny, it's physically small, and it's just got, it's really easy to read. It's got like topics and just very easy, it's like you'll get these like travel guides. I don't know if folks even know what pocket guides are, but that's the idea behind it. It's like a travel guide that just has, the basic broad strokes, the shallowest end of every single thing, but you can learn a lot of things. You just don't learn any one of those things too much. That's what this book is. It's extremely well organized. It's very well laid out. There's artwork on every page. The table of contents alone is incredible because the whole thing is only 50 pages. And some of these entire sections are literally to this Outer Planes section is all of 2 pages, and yet we get subheadings for every single different of these extra dimensional zones. Gets its own little entry in the table of contents. So that's fantastic. It's almost too much information, but I'm never going to complain about having too much information. That's greatness. You're not going to get any mechanics or rules or anything like that, but I do think this could still be useful for players as well as DMs, because you're going to get all that information, especially if you're a player who's really wants to get into the lore and the surrounding knowledge of Eberron. Then this could be a really useful thing, maybe even more useful than having the actual full campaign book, because maybe you don't need to know. You don't want to necessarily dive headfirst into all of this extra stuff. Let the DM worry about that. You, the player, you just want to know about your chosen faction or your race and the area you're from and all that. And then you can look at this guide. And the cool thing is, under every single entry, the guide includes a little learn more footnote at the end, which explains where you can go look up additional information. So every single one of these topics is pulled from something that came from somewhere else. So you're not really going to get any new information here if you've read the last 15 years worth of Eberron material. But even if you have, this is a really good index of all that information. You can say oh shit, where the hell was, where can I learn more about the Drow? Well, it's in the Secrets of Zendrick source book. And this even says, SOX chapter 3. So you can instantly, okay, good, I can pull that off and look that up. Yes, Google exists. There's a thing, but this puts the information out there. It's published, it's reliable, and it's very, very well written and well edited in a way that makes someone like me, who would be intimidated by learning an entirely new area, because I've spent the last, I have to think for a second, 5 years. Yeah, 5 years in the Forgotten Realms, and when it comes to my D&D experience. So I don't, do I have time to learn a whole new setting? Do we care? Reading this assuages a lot of my fears and worries about that, because I can instantly jump in and learn the most important information. Okay, Eberron, how is it different? Well, the way the magic works with technology is a lot different. The themes, well, they're coming off this war-torn land, and these areas have this simmering peace that's only pretty recent. They were a century at war, all these very diverse areas in this one continent. It's a very pulpy and noir theme, which goes along with the more modern setting. So instead of high fantasy dungeon crawls, you might see more politicizing and detective work, for example. Although you'll still be battling, you could have all these, guns. It's called wand slinging here, gunslinging type fights, and you'll still be having excursions into wild lands and dungeons basically. Although there's not very many dragons in this one, I noticed. All the dragons are kind of like the gods of other universes where they exist, but they're extremely rare and aloof and powerful. And then the actual gods in this universe, very interestingly, I guess I won't get into any religious talks, but may or may not exist. It's just based purely on faith. Nobody, gods haven't manifested or anything like that, but they just have this organized religious system because people believe in all of these different systems. So that's all really cool, and it all explains that in a really, really good way. As you can see, just really great use of Eberron art throughout. I love the way it's organized, the headings, the subheadings. All of that looks fantastic. The dragon marked houses are in here, all the different races and how they're unique. There's sections on basically a brief history of that race, as well as what that race is currently doing, and maybe like subsections of that particular race. So, for example, on the, I think the Drow is a good example. The Drow are not, spider worshipping matriarchal dominatrixes, which we could go off on a whole rant about how in D&D, like the only female ruled race is super incredibly evil. That's a different topic. That's outside the scope of this review. The Drow in Eberron were former slaves of the giants, and apparently the giants were this like progenitor race that previously ruled over everybody and had all this high magic and stuff. They were the classic fallen race that came before. They enslaved elves. Some of the elves rebelled, so giants created Drow to hunt them down. Drow broke away, and now you've got Drow in different, and that was their history. And then Drow are now in different subsections. Some of them worship fire. Some of them are jungle dwelling that worship some scorpion god, and others are actually a little bit resembling of the Forgotten Realms neighbors, where they disappeared into the whatever they call the Underdark in this world. I forget. It's the Khyber. And they're down there battling all the subterranean creatures because that's, better than the existence that they had. All of that information that I just explained is within these 4 little paragraphs on this right side of the screen, which is freaking amazing. Like, that's so cool. So you can quickly run through here and learn all of this really awesome, helpful information. Every single sentence is useful. Every word is useful. It's just incredibly well organized and well written. I was blown away by how excited I am, and I'm not even kidding. Right now, I have the tabs open for purchasing Eberron Rising from the Last War, because no, I don't have the physical book, as well as I'm looking at several DM's Guild adventures and supplements, because this made me super excited about running stuff in Eberron, and I think that's about the highest praise I can give a supplement like this, which is it makes somebody like me who had really zero interest and not much knowledge of Eberron into suddenly like, oh, okay, I understand this. I can quickly glean all this information, which there's a lot, but it makes me more interested to learn more. And that's exactly what a pocket guide should do. Ease you in, give you the broad strokes of all these different things in a very easy to read, well-organized manner. And then on my own, I can decide what aspects that I want to learn more of, what I want to expand my knowledge base with, and then I can go from there. And it does that for all these different chapters. There's a chapter on races, a chapter on locations, a chapter on factions, and a chapter on the faith system, the organized religions and different cultures. And all of that works really well. They all have the different subheadings. They're all just a few paragraphs, some of them even only a few sentences long, but again, you get so much information within so little space, which is a really, really impressive thing to do. As a writer, being able to say more with less, I know, is such a useful, helpful, impressive feat. And this is one of the best examples of that concept. Very, very well done. And then the final appendices that we get. Appendix A is includes a bunch of secrets that maybe players shouldn't know, which, yeah, good luck giving a player something and telling them, don't read this part, whatever. Maybe just for DM. Although even then, the actual secrets behind Eberron, which there are some big ones. There's the whole Mournlands were created as what basically ended the last war. which is one of the nations was just imploded with its own cataclysm, and nobody knows why it happened. And the secret is nobody does know. Like, it's literally just up to the DM running that campaign. And usually a lot of, overarching campaigns are about the Mournlands. And the cool thing is you can just decide whatever you want it to be. That's what it is. And one of the things that works really well with bringing all these different source books and stuff together, and I realized I found this out as I looked up some information on Eberron, is it really hasn't changed in the last 15 years. The setting has always been coming off of this cataclysm and coming off of the war and all that. Like, it's not a world that has gone through different eras. It doesn't have like the spell plague and all that stuff that Forgotten Realms has gone through, and you have to worry about like, okay, what time period are we in if you're really caring about that kind of thing, or all these events that have been happening. Eberron is just everything has happened. Everything that happens during this one time period, and that's where you get to adventure in. It's just kind of this frozen in time, and then we just keep expanding things out from there. And that makes this a easier product to handle because you don't have to worry about all these different discrepancies in canon and time periods and timelines. So that does help. And that's the source material just doing a good job with not actually progressing the timeline at all. Appendix B is probably my favorite part of this entire source book because it's where all of those little learn mores that I pointed out, which are at the bottom of each of these, which give you a little abbreviation and then like a chapter or something. You come here to this Appendix B, and that's further reading, and it tells you what source book you can find all that information in, when was it published, what is included in there, what edition it was in, like all these different informations you could possibly want. It even goes one step further. This is, by the way, the full picture-friendly one. There is an entirely separate printer-friendly guide, which doesn't have any of the fancy, fonts and colors, and it's just pure, black and white, so it's easy to print. I always like to review, obviously, the nice-looking PDFs, but it does include that. This includes all of hyperlinks to like DM's Guild entries, if they are applicable, which most of these are because Wizards was smart and put all that up on the DM's Guild, so you can obviously rebuy all their shit. So if you really want to dive into that stuff, you can click on any of these and instantly pick it up on the DM's Guild. It goes even further than that. There's issues of Dragon Magazine, Dungeon Magazine. There are notes on Eberron novels. There are links and notes on previously published adventures, including currently published adventures. So these are all the previous ones that take place in Eberron, as well as even a guide to converting to 5th edition, because unfortunately, as I mentioned, 5th edition D&D is almost solely focused on Forgotten Realms, so we don't actually get a whole lot of material. But that's where other folks come into play. For example, the Across Eberron development team, which made this product, has also created their own kind of Pathfinder-esque or 3rd and 4th edition-esque adventure path, which covers 13 different adventures going from 1 to 7. There's also a links to the organized play section of Oracle of War, which was, I believe, created or started, I don't know if it's finished or not, but it was started coming out when Eberron Rising from the Last War was released, and then in all these novels. Excellent. I love having this appendix full of more information because that's exactly what I'm looking for when I'm excited about looking into Eberron and getting deeper into stuff and realizing, okay, this is a really interesting setting. It already uses, the play style and a lot of the races and monsters that we are familiar with, but creates a more interesting, modernized setting with maybe some more like political maneuverings and just some more different stuff. Especially if if Forgotten Realms is getting a little bit long in the tooth, or maybe the high fantasy concept is getting a little bit old and you're looking for something different, which I didn't think I was, but now that I'm looking at this, I am getting incredibly excited about it. So just really, really interesting stuff. I absolutely love the way it's organized. I can't say enough good things about it. If you notice, I really don't have any complaints either. It's absolutely fantastic. So let's go over my pros and cons for the Eberronicon, which that took me a lot of practice to make sure I did not mispronounce, a pocket guide to the world. Pros: an effective, concise summary of 15 years of Eberron lore and information. That is an impressive feat. Pros: well organized and beautiful layout. Absolutely love the way it looks. It really takes the concept of a pocket guide and runs away with it. Like, absolutely fantastic job of putting in that just the perfect amount of information under each topic, but also covering every topic that I would care about. and then giving all those annotations, which is my final pro, annotated footnotes for further reading into 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5th edition source books, novels, and adventures. Awesome. I'm excited to jump in. Cons? None. I got nothing. I love this pocket guide so much. Final verdict. The Eberronicon, a pocket guide to the world's lovely layout, easy reading, and wealth of information, make it the must-have supplement for Eberron players and dungeon masters alike. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.